Hello again and welcome to another bearing removal and replacement video featuring Boca bearings. Now on the table today I've got a very nice large two-stroke engine that is in need of refurbishment. Now this engine was sent to me from a friend and we're going to be refurbishing this and several other engines to be used for some new fuel experiments that this buddy of mine is developing. But one of the key things about refurbishing an engine is actually replacing the bearings in it. And that's going to be very important for us in this fuel experiment and analysis that we'll be doing. So let's go to the table and look at this really large 29.5 cubic centimeter Moki 1.8 engine. Okay, so as I just said, today's subject is a Moki 1.8 engine. It says 30 here, but it's actually 29.49 cubic centimeters. But this is an engine that's pretty tired and it needs some work. In fact, it's not even complete. It's got a little bit of damage. Now, I don't have most of the screws in it. It came to me basically with no screws in it, so I'm just going to quickly show you some of this stuff. It looks pretty low time, but maybe had a little bit of a rough life. In fact, it doesn't even have a front bearing in it right now, so that's one I won't have to be removing. But this engine, not bad. I think we can get this thing up and running again quite easily. And this is going to be the section that I'm really focusing on, getting this rear bearing out and then replacing both sets of bearings. But in the process of doing that, I'm going to have to disassemble the rest of this and get it all in the parts cleaner. So let me go finish disassembling this and then we'll get on to actually removing this rear bearing and then replacing with new ones. Okay, so here we are on the table with just the front housing of this Moki engine, and as I said just previously, it doesn't even have a front bearing in this engine, so I'm really just left with heating this thing up, getting this crankshaft out, and hopefully seeing what happens with that bearing. Hopefully it comes out on the crankshaft, otherwise I may have to employ other means. So the thing with this is it's so large that I'm not even really going to be able to put it in my vise because I just don't have the space. So I'm going to have to just heat this thing up and see if I can tap it out with this block or the hammer and take it from there. So with that said, let me get my glove on and begin heating this mass of aluminum up. Seeing what's going to happen here. Alright, let's just see if that's enough to get that out. Okay, so our crankshaft came out, but our bearing did not. So what this means is, and it definitely, so this bearing is such that there's actually a lip on the inside of this, which means there's absolutely no lip to grab on for this bearing whatsoever. So I'm going to have to pull out my Boca bearing puller set and hope that I can actually grip on this bearing between where it meets the housing and there and get a grip on it and pull it out. So let me pause the video here for a few minutes and get my tool out and see what's going to happen. Okay, so I dug out my Boca bearing part of the miniature bearing removal tool set, and this is one of those types of removal tools that it fits inside and goes in and grabs onto the inner portion of the race, and then you expand it, so it's got these expandable jaws. But this is actually designed to be pulled. I'm going to have to pound it out because of the way it is, so I'm just going to kind of lay this in there. And in this instance, it's actually nice that there's a lip there that this can just sit on. So I'm just going to hold this thing in place while I tighten this needle chuck up. And hopefully that'll get right on that bearing, I think. It's kind of hard to see. Let me just do this real quick. That's basically what I'm going to have to do to get this bearing out. But I really need to make sure that this is grabbing on the bearing itself and not necessarily, because there's just such a small gap there. I think it was in there. Because there's that lip on the inside of the housing, I don't think there's any other way it can grab. So I'm just going to snug that thing up. I usually like to see this thing really turn and see it turning the bearing. I think we're in about as good a shape there as we're going to be, so I'm going to have to just apply some heat to this thing and hope that this is actually going to be long enough for me to pound that out. So I'm actually going to have to use the end of this socket extension as a drive to drive this bearing out. So right now we're to another heat cycle because that's cooled down. So I need to heat this thing up considerably now. See if it's going to want to give up this bearing. One thing I didn't do is I didn't really drizzle any oil on there. Oh, that doesn't look like it. Yeah, that bearing's starting to come out now. There we go. This part should be pretty cool. So there we go. That's how we have to get that bearing out. Sometimes that's what you have to do. And there we go. There's our massive rear bearing, which is rather warm right now. So now what I'm going to do is get all these parts cleaned up, and then we'll get some new Boca bearings installed. Okay, so here I am back at the table. I've got all the parts of this engine cleaned, every one of them. I just took the time to clean all of them. But I've got this massive crankshaft all cleaned up, ready to accept bearings, as well as the front housing. So I've got my bearings, my tools here, and I also have my bottle of Boca's Lightning Lube Road Power, which I like to use as my reassembly and bearing installation tool or lubricant. And I usually just put some in this jar, and it looks like I might have enough in this jar to do the job now. So let me go ahead and lubricate these parts up, and then we'll talk about these bearing set that I'm going to install here. So because of the size of this engine, I have to do some adjustments on my desktop vise because this thing is just, it's got a long crankshaft, it's big. Okay, so that's all lubricated up. Let's talk about this set of bearings from Boca Bearings. Now this kit number is at ENK-065HP. This is a high performance set, and it has the two bearings required. Here's the front bearing, which is a rubber seal bearing, and I'll be removing one of those seals, the one that faces in towards the engine. And then this large bearing doesn't look like it needs anything done to it at all. It's already a unshielded bearing, and it's ready to go, other than aside from just being lubricated up. So here's our beautiful rubber seal bearing, and I believe that I am going to just go ahead and just very gently remove one side of the seals. And you just kind of go in here above the race, the inner race, and just gently lift. And that seal is out now. This is the side with the race on it. That'll be fine because there's plenty of oil flow that can go through there. So now the only thing left to do is cap this jar, move it off to the side, and heat this crankcase front housing up, and we'll install the bearings. So as always, I like to grab my lubricant again because I forgot to lube the bearings, and with this one I can actually fit my finger on the inside. So let me kind of do a little bit of lubing of the outer bearing surfaces too, and the inside here. This one's almost big enough for me to get some lubrication on there too. So I'm going to install this rear bearing just right on the, hopefully it's going to go, just slide right on here. Otherwise it'll get tapped on place. Let's see if I can flip that around. There we go. And there we go. That bearing's in place. Now we'll just heat this front housing up, put the front bearing in, followed by the rear. Okay, I see the oil starting to smoke a little bit. That's usually the sign that we're ready to install bearings. Well, maybe not. Maybe I need to heat this up a little bit more because that was really tight. It was pretty warm. That was pretty warm. I think I am going to put my glove on and heat this thing up a little bit more for this rear bearing because, and I'm also going to have to readjust this too. This was because of the length of that crankshaft. I'm going to need that length to get that fully seated. This is just a large piece of aluminum and it's taking a lot of heat. I do not expect to have the same issues here, so let's just slide this in place. Look at that. I mean, I didn't even need to do anything with that one. That's all there is to installing that one. So the thing with these Moki engines is they're such tight tolerances. And that's why I was really kind of concerned about getting this rear bearing in here. They have such tight tolerances on the front and rear covers, the front housing and the rear cover, that they don't even use gaskets at all. That's how close tolerance these engines are. So there you have it. That's pretty warm. A nice installation for this Moki 180 engine, and now I can continue on and get the rest of the parts needed and get this engine rebuilt and ready for some fuel testing.